Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 59 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today my guest will be Professor Rob Kahn, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt and owner of Gracie Tampa in Tampa, Florida. But before we get to that, let's start with a jiu-jitsu quote, and then we'll do a product review. Then we'll have the interview with Rob, followed by the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. So let's start with our quote, which is, "Jiu-Jitsu is like a philosophy. It helps me learn how to face life." And that's from the Grandmaster Rorion Gracie. Okay, on to our product review. And the product I'd like to review in this episode is a DVD called Yoga for Fighters. And Yoga for Fighters is a program developed by Phil Migler-Reese, who was featured on episode 41 of the show. So if you haven't heard that, certainly go back and check that out. Really good episode. Phil is a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt, master level yoga instructor, and the owner, with his brother Ricardo, of Balance Studios in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He has over 20 years of experience in both yoga and jiu-jitsu, and he's worked with numerous BJJ and MMA champions, professional athletes, celebrities, and regular Joes. He's also appeared on Fox, NBC, CBS, ESPN, and been featured in Grappling, Tap Out, and Black Belt magazines, and on the cover of MMA Worldwide magazine. So Yoga for Fighters is a scientific sequence designed to improve your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts movements, with an emphasis on deflating the ego, which Phil says is your first opponent in any fight. The DVD is for anyone, but was specifically designed for Jiu-Jitsu and MMA fighters. It is a sport-specific formula for success, and some of the things that it provides are fearless flexibility, balance and counterbalance, functional core strength, emotional intelligence, relaxation and recovery, focused breathing, and mental edge and agility. So the DVD is broken into several sections, and during the introduction, Phil welcomes the students to the program and explains the flow of the practice. The practice program includes variations on yoga flows like the sun salutation, standing poses, seated poses, and a cool down. The poses in the yoga practice can be a little challenging if you're just starting and very new to yoga, but they will provide flexibility, balance, core strength, focused breathing, and relaxation. And after this, Phil and Ricardo go through a series of exercises that explain the application of the yoga poses to BJJ and MMA. So it really gets into first, kind of basic poses and a good practice, and then breaks it down very well and very detailed to how it can really help the MMA and BJJ practitioner. A couple of testimonials for this DVD are first from Rorion Gracie. It says, "Yoga is the best form of stretching, and Phil is by far the best to teach it." And then also Frankie Edgar, UFC fighter and All-American wrestler, says, "Yoga for Fighters is a great DVD because it was custom made with the mixed martial artist in mind. And I certainly agree with these reviews. I've done a lot of different yoga over the years and believe that yoga can certainly be an excellent complement and addition to one's BJJ practice. In the last few years, there have been a number of other DVDs that have come out related to jiu-jitsu and fighting, but Phil's is the original, and it's the only one I've checked out, so I can personally attest to the quality of the instruction and the program. Phil certainly knows his craft and is very good at it. A great guy to learn from. So I highly recommend you check this out. You can go to yogaforfighters.com. I will also be posting information and links on the website under product reviews. So check it out and let your jiu-jitsu or MMA practice go to the next level with increased flexibility and mindfulness. Okay, time now for our interview. Today's guest is Rob Kahn, and Rob is a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt and Royce Gracie's first black belt. He has many, many years of experience in Jiu-Jitsu. He also fought MMA and has become a very successful MMA coach as well. He's produced a number of UFC fighters, as well as several Abu Dhabi competitors and champions as well in the no-gi arena of Jiu-Jitsu. I first became aware of Rob through stumbling across one of his YouTube videos in which he was teaching a near-side armbar. And it was similar to one I had learned before, but I really liked the way he was breaking it down. I really liked his details better than what I was currently doing. So that led me to explore him further, and everything that I explored and found out I really liked. In this episode, he discusses everything from learning at the Gracie Academy many years ago and what an impact Rorion Gracie had on him and his teaching style of jiu-jitsu, no-gi training, working with the Special Operations Soldiers and the Wounded Warrior Project. He discusses the special relationship he's had with John Burke as well as Master Royce Gracie. And he also gets into some interests that he has off the mat that people may not be aware of about Rob. As stated earlier, Rob has an immense amount of experience with jiu-jitsu and freely shares his knowledge and insight here. So I know you're going to enjoy this interview. After the interview, stay tuned for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. So without further ado, let's talk to Rob now. Okay, I'm speaking with Professor Rob Kahn. So thank you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Marty. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I really do appreciate your time. I know you stay pretty busy. So I know you have a lot of experience and a long history in martial arts and jiu-jitsu. And I know you're considered Royce Gracie's first black belt. So we definitely want to get into that. But if you would just start by sharing kind of how you got involved in martial arts and what led you to jiu-jitsu, and what's that been like throughout the years that led you to where you are today, sir?
Yeah, sure. I do have a long history, unfortunately, which means I'm old, very old, especially in martial arts years. I'm like, we age like dogs.
Sure.
And I started, really, the only martial art I really took seriously back in the day was boxing. I loved boxing as a kid. Loved watching it. Me and my father, that was kind of like our hobby to watch together. Like most fathers would go to, take their kids to baseball games. My father took me to closed circuit boxing matches. As a kid, I remember seeing Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran won in at closed circuit TV. In Yonkers Raceway in New York. Or Hagler Hearns, and I even caught like the tail end of Ali, some of his last fights, like with Spinks and Holmes and Trevor Berbick, and so that was kind of my thing. When I got when I got old enough, I got a driver's license. I started looking around for a boxing gym. And, typically what you do to find a boxing gym is you find the poorest area, and the poorest neighborhood around. Exactly. And you drive in there, and inevitably you'll stumble across a boxing gym, and that's pretty much what I did. And I started boxing when I was about 16, 17 years old. And, I loved it. I took it real seriously for periods of time, but unfortunately, like I said, I was a kid. I was doing it all on my own. I didn't really have anybody pushing me or anything, so like most kids, my interest would wane. So I'd be real into it for 2-3 months, 4 months, training really hard, being really focused. And then, 2-3 months where I'd be off partying like a kid. And that kind of set a pattern for, from the time I was, say, 17 all the way through college. And right by my senior year, I always wanted to do the Golden Gloves, the New York State Golden Gloves. And right. In New York, there's like 2 major gloves tournaments. There's the Daily News Golden Gloves, which is held downstate in like Manhattan, and it covers pretty much Manhattan and Westchester. The 5 boroughs of Manhattan, Westchester, and Long Island. And then you have the New York State Golden Gloves, which covers pretty much the rest of New York State. And the Daily News is the bigger, the more prestigious one, but they're both, pretty well known. They both had famous people fight out of them. And I was going to school in Binghamton, New York, which was upstate New York at the time. And I focused on the New York State Golden Gloves. And I entered the tournament. It was my senior year in college. It was my only chance, I thought, to do something like that, because I figured once I got a real job in Manhattan, I'd never have the time to train for something like this. So I took it seriously. And right around that time, I met a guy by the name of John Burke. And John was a kind of a friend of a friend, and he was introduced to me under the premise of he trained this style of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I'd never heard of anything remotely like that before. Right. Wait, it's jiu-jitsu, but it's from Brazil? Like, wait, what? I don't understand.
Exactly.
And this was back in like 94. So the first UFC had gone off, I think, and it was before the second one. And I was really like, I'd seen the commercials for the UFC, but I didn't believe them. I heard cage match, and I immediately thought it was like WWE wrestling. Right. And like I didn't listen to a word after I heard cage, And
absolutely.
Right now it's probably around I think UFC 2 was just about to happen, and I meet this guy, and he's like, hey, I train with this Gracie family, and he's telling me a little bit about it, and I'm like in my head thinking, this guy is out of his mind. He's training with jiu-jitsu from Brazil. Like, what is that?
Exactly.
What's next? Karate from Mexico? Like, didn't make any sense to me. So he was like, hey man, I'd really like to spar with a boxer. And I was like, yeah, sure. And, we set up a date to spar, and the day comes, and he tells me and he totally set me up. Like we joke about it to this day. He totally set me up. He's like, hey man, I don't want to wear the gloves because I need to grab you. So I'm not going to throw any punches. What I'll do is, if anything, I'll just smack you. But most likely, I'm not even going to punch you. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I could punch you, but you're not going to punch me. And he's like, yeah, well, maybe I might smack you, but that's it. And I'm like, yeah, man, have a ball. You can leave the gloves off all you like.
Yeah, right. Bring it.
And obviously, it didn't work out so well for me. I got taken down, choked out, armbarred, choked out, armbarred, choked out, armbarred, choked out, armbarred, like over and over again. And I was like, what are you doing to me? Like, it was so foreign to me. Fighting to me was about standing and throwing punches, and this guy just clowned me. And he was like, well, it's the style of jiu-jitsu from Brazil, and he took the time to show me the Gracie in action tapes I don't know if you remember those, but the
yeah,
Gracie
definitely
tapes would come out.
Yep.
And so I watched those, and I got really into it. I got the fever for jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah, those are eye openers, aren't they?
Yeah, and I wanted, but I was still involved with the Golden Gloves tournament, which was coming up, and that was like kind of an important goal I had set. So between college and training for that, I didn't have a lot of time to do jiu-jitsu. So we had done a few classes together, but really not much. But I knew I wanted to do it enough where that he invited me out to LA for the summer. He was going to go out and live the whole summer out in Torrance and train full time for the whole summer. And we'd become friends enough where he invited me to go with him. So I accepted the offer, like on the spot. So I kind of in my head said, okay, after the gloves tournament, I'll be focusing on this jiu-jitsu. And the gloves came. I wound up winning the novice division, 178. And that was, I believe, the end of April in 95. So it was my senior year of of college. I didn't want to hear about anything between then and us flying away June 1st to California, because, like I said, I was a senior in college, and it was time to party and enjoy myself for the last month of school. And so I consider my start date in jiu-jitsu, even though I had a little training before then, my start date for jiu-jitsu really is June 1st, 1995. Even though I did take a few lessons towards the end of 94, and I would say between the end of 94 and June of 95, I took maybe 5 lessons of jiu-jitsu. And no sparring. It was just technique-based. Like John showed me headlock escapes and UPA, elbow escape, Americana, and we were working on the guard pass when I left for California for the first time. And I get to California, and I walk in the door, and the first morning class, who was teaching it but Royce Gracie himself? Like, I never really thought to ask John kind of the question about, like, how does it run out there? I just knew I was going out to do this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But I wasn't expecting Royce himself to be on the mat teaching class, at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I walked in the room, I'm like, holy cow, that's Royce Gracie. Like, he's teaching the class? Okay. That's totally blew me away. Yeah. I'm like, so first chance I get to meet, actually I met Royce briefly before then. Me and John had taken a ride down to see UFC 5. And John and Royce had developed a really good friendship at that point. And so we were able to go to the after party. And I got a chance to meet Royce very briefly at the after party. So that was like really my first opportunity to speak with Royce and start to get to know him was that first day in June of 95. And like everybody else, you start doing jiu-jitsu, you get that bug, and it becomes a lifelong obsession.
So how much time did you get to spend out in Torrance at the academy?
I did that whole summer. Me and John, basically, we came up with the Gracie Immersion Camp before there was a Gracie Immersion Camp. We just immersed ourselves in jiu-jitsu for that whole summer. I was out there for 8 weeks, and I literally took every single class and sparred in every open sparring session for 8 weeks. Like, we got out there, we get to the morning class, take the 3 classes in the morning, and then we would spar in during the lunch break for like a 2-hour or 3-hour lunch break. We'd spar for that 2-3 hours, and then we'd go help with the kids' class, and then we would take all the classes at night, spar in each one of them, and then we and we were broke college kids, so we literally had to rollerblade like 7 miles to get home and rollerblade 7 miles each way to get to the academy because we couldn't rent a car or anything. So at one point I finally said, I'm breaking down, I'm buying a bicycle because I couldn't rollerblade very well. And so I bought a bicycle, which turned out to be another mistake because then I just wound up becoming John's towing service. And I towed John to and from the academy every day.
Funny.
Instead of just biking myself. So, but that's how we got around, unless we got lucky where somebody, you know, with like a pickup truck or whatever, let us jump in and because now we needed a pickup truck to fit the bike in the back, you know, which happened to be training and take us home. Like John Crouch was there that summer, and I'm you know, John Crouch out in Arizona. Right. He teaches Ben Henderson, and he runs the lab out there. We became the three of us became really good friends that summer. That was John's summer out there too, his first summer, and so John gave us a ride home a bunch, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great summer. I came back to New York, and I hooked up with some guys who had been doing jiu-jitsu with John and or through John in New York. So I started training with those guys, and by default, I kind of became the instructor because after my, you know, 8-week, 12-hour day immersion in jiu-jitsu, I kind of had more experience than all those guys. So when I got back to New York, I became the instructor. John stayed out in California and basically moved out there. So I was training in New York with this group of guys. One of them being Tony Joffrey, who really was the one who got John involved with jiu-jitsu. Tony had read an article in like 1991 in like Karate Kung Fu Illustrated, and you know, about the Gracie family and the Gracie Challenge and all that stuff. And at the end of the article, it said, you know, if you have any questions or are interested in jiu-jitsu, please feel free to contact Rorion Gracie. So Tony contacted Rorion Gracie.
Oh, nice.
And Rorion had him fly out for a week to do some private lessons. This was back in the garage days before they had an academy. And I remember Tony telling the story. He had like a black belt in Taekwondo, and he gets out there, and Rorion tells Tony, "Hey man, I'm unfortunately going to be out of town this week, so I'm not going to be able to work with you. So you're going to work with my brother." And Tony got a week's worth of private lessons with Rickson Gracie, and like, talk about like getting something that you're just totally not. You have no idea the value of what you just got. You know, like Tony. This is Tony's very first experience with jiu-jitsu, and he gets to spend an entire week of private lessons with Rickson Gracie. Like what you know, jiu-jitsu guy wouldn't have absolutely killed for that.
Amazing.
At some point, and Tony just had no clue the amazing the amazing magnitude like that. Yeah, like,
it's the right place at the right time.
You know, and he kicks himself because it's like, if he could have just somehow switched it up and gotten that same exact week when he was like a purple belt or a brown belt or a black belt, like when he could really, you know, get some knowledge off of Rickson, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Tony started with that. He used John because he needed a training partner. So John was his neighbor. John wanted to learn. Tony needed somebody to practice with. So John became a natural selection, and then John kind of did the same thing with me. So that's how it went for about a year and a half. After about a year and a half so now again I kind of get thrust into this role of teacher as a blue belt. 6-week or 8-week blue belt. I got my blue belt pretty quickly because I was training so much out there that I got my blue belt in 14 days. And but like I said, it was like 12 hours a day, and
right.
I got it directly from Royce. Every belt I've gotten has been from Royce, and I felt like I picked it up pretty quick. So when I came back from New York again, I got thrust into this role of kind of like instructor, which I believe helped me out a lot with my jiu-jitsu because it made me look at things from so many different angles. Sure. as a teacher when I'm answering questions. And I did that for about almost a year and a half. And then I decided to move out to LA. And I packed my bags, quit my job, moved out to LA. Nice. Picked up a job out there, and was part of the inaugural group of instructor program guys.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a cool time. You know, like the UFC was still at its beginnings. jiu-jitsu was just at the start of this like meteoric explosion of popularity. And I felt like I was there, like right at the kind of the kickoff of that, you know?
Right.
It was no longer just this kind of closed-held secret to, you know, like within the Southern California area. It was now like this international phenomenon. And we would get crazy amounts of people coming in from all over the world trying to learn this.
I was going to say, I would imagine there'd be a lot of people in your position or similar who came from different places and just really ready to get all the knowledge they can from it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people came in from everywhere. A lot of people trying to get into the instructor program. A lot of people there just like I did at first, like coming out for extended trips to train. Then you still had, even at that time, you still had challenge matches coming in. You still got to watch, you know, that excitement of seeing a challenge match live, which was cool. It was a really exciting time. And Royce was still, the undefeated UFC champ. So there was just, it was just a real exciting time to be part of jiu-jitsu.
I'm jealous. That's an amazing time to be part of jiu-jitsu and part of that whole movement as it was getting started.
Oh,
incredible.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, it was like revolutionary. You see this Gracie family who are absolutely, you know, backing up everything they're saying. First you see it through the Gracie challenges, and then you see it through the UFC. And it's like, holy cow, this is what martial arts is supposed to be about. Like a little guy beating a big guy and doing it easy, you know?
Wow.
They really were the first time, because I had some experience with martial arts growing up. I'd always left disappointed, you know, with some of these commercialized schools that were popping up all over the place. And this was the first time, you know, you could see very clearly that the stuff that they were teaching works the way they say it works, you know? And
absolutely,
it was a fun time to be part of jiu-jitsu.
So what stands out in your mind as some of the most interesting or best things you learned during that time in that instructor program?
You know, honestly, Rorion, Royce has always been my instructor, and Royce is like a brother to me. And Royce, in his own right, is a phenomenal instructor. But Rorion Gracie is an amazing instructor, and some of the ways he teaches and some of the tips that he gave on how to teach have stuck with me to this day. He had an enormous influence on my teaching, and I don't think, you know, I mean, Rorion is some people think of him as controversial, but he was always good to me. And again, like his influence on my teaching has been pretty profound. I really learned a lot from him and how to teach the art of jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And because Rorion goes beyond just the technical, Rorion's classes and Rorion's teaching goes beyond just the technical stuff. You know, he doesn't teach just the technique. He teaches the overall concept of jiu-jitsu, the overall picture of jiu-jitsu. Like he teaches kind of from a big picture perspective down. And
right.
If you understand the underlying principles of jiu-jitsu, then the individual techniques should make sense. And
I agree.
Should be easier to pull off. And I haven't seen anybody better at that than Rorion Gracie.
Well, I agree. He certainly has a knack for laying it down. And if you're like a lot of people listening, some of your first, you know, real instruction that, aside from live at seminars and things like that, for a lot of us, it was Rorion and Royce's videos back in the day. Those were gold.
The beginner tapes, yeah, they're amazing. You know, and like I said, it was funny because back in the day, the times when Royce wouldn't teach, you know, Royce was away or something, and Rorion would have to fill in, I would be annoyed because I wanted to take Royce's class because Rorion, you know, had this, you know, unbelievable reliance on the most basic of basic jiu-jitsu, you know, like the upa, the elbow skip, like the most fundamental jiu-jitsu. So when Rorion was going to take over a class because Royce was out of town or something, I'd be like, oh no. And then I'd take Rorion's class again and learn the UPA. Oh no, not the elbow escape again. But yet
right.
every single time that happened, I would come out of that class with such a deeper understanding of that move. And then down the road, when I became full-time instructor 12 years ago, I wound up finding myself parroting Rorion so much, it was crazy. I'm like, oh my God, this guy had so much influence on my teaching, because I'm catching myself and almost remembering word for word some of the ways Rorion explained things back then are the same way I'm doing it 20 years later.
That's great.
So as much as I didn't, I didn't, and it was funny because I didn't really want, like I said, I was kind of disappointed when it wasn't Royce teaching, and I wound up, like I said, learning not necessarily more about jiu-jitsu, but more about teaching jiu-jitsu than any other person. He just really has a great system down for making any student understand the concepts of jiu-jitsu. He's brilliant at breaking jiu-jitsu down to its most microscopic level to make somebody understand it.
I completely agree, and he has just a really incredible energy to go along with it. But I think you're speaking a lot about jiu-jitsu maturity, because I think for a lot of us, we want more candy, and we're very anxious in the early exposure to jiu-jitsu especially. We want something new, flashy, and new techniques. But as you mature a little bit, you really appreciate more depth and more instruction on the ability, or more insight on the ability of imparting the knowledge to others. So I think that comes with a little bit of maturity in jiu-jitsu.
Oh, yeah, and I think in the beginning, jiu-jitsu is very easy to associate skill in jiu-jitsu with the number of moves that you know, and nothing could be further from the truth, Yet, in the beginning, it's hard not to think that way, because, the day that you get caught with something you haven't seen before leaves a mark on you, and you start thinking, oh my God, I need to know more moves so I don't get caught by surprise again, Meanwhile, usually it's not the move that surprised you; it was the setup, or the sneaky way in which he hid the move coming, which is what really caught you in the move. And like I said, Rorion's ability to break down the overall philosophy of jiu-jitsu and how it works was just amazing. And he's incredibly charismatic. So like I said, I would go into those classes kind of kicking and screaming, and I'd come out with a deeper appreciation for whatever move he taught. And that's not to say Royce isn't an amazing instructor and doesn't do that as well, because he does. Royce is, like I said, even back then, Royce was my favorite instructor to take classes with, because his level of detail was amazing, and he also kept it fun. He kept it, he was, kept it lighthearted, kept it joking, and I always had a blast in Royce's classes.
Yeah, much respect to both of those for sure, and all the influence they've had on many, many people throughout the world.
It drives me a little crazy, because there's this, there's this idea, or this, sometimes people give Rorion and Royce, or there's, sometimes some, negative talk about Rorion and Royce. And it's like, without those two guys, nobody in America would be doing jiu-jitsu. No American would be teaching jiu-jitsu for a living. Nobody in America would have any exposure to jiu-jitsu. So it's like, how anybody couldn't be appreciative of what those two have done to spread the gospel of jiu-jitsu to the world, and especially America, is crazy to me. It's like every single person involved in jiu-jitsu today owes an enormous thank you to Rorion and Royce Gracie, because you wouldn't be doing it without them. I can guarantee you that.
So true. People tend to give Grandmaster Elio props and respect, and certainly deservedly so. But
absolutely.
But let us not ever forget how Rorion and Royce really started the ripple here in the States, and it spread throughout the world, and it opened everybody's eyes. Before that, it was just let's watch the kung fu movies and karate, and nothing, not knocking them, but that's what reality was to most people, and they opened everybody's eyes. They started the revolution, so we owe it all to them.
100%. You can't take away Elio's contribution to the art. I mean, the guy is, in every sense of the word, the grandmaster.
Right.
Him and Carlos, really started the revolution. But without bringing it to America, it was kind of limited to just Brazil. And Rorion knew bringing it to America means bringing it to the world, and that's what he did. And look at the results. I mean, it's unlike anything that's ever happened in martial arts. He not only created this jiu-jitsu revolution and took an art which had literally zero exposure in America, and within a decade, it was, as big a martial art as there is in the world. And then on top of that, created a sports industry that was just sold for $4.5 billion, which was, his baby. So he did some pretty amazing things.
He definitely had the vision and was ahead of his time for sure. So let's talk a little bit about which came first. You're getting into MMA and fighting, or did you get your black belt before that?
Well, I had, like anybody else, like when I first saw jiu-jitsu and the effectiveness of it, and then John Burke had shown me the first couple of UFCs, shown me the Gracie in actions. I had designs on fighting MMA, and my original goal was to fight MMA when I got good enough. And when I went out to California, started training and focusing on it. I think it was around 90. I'm going to say it was around 97, 98 was when John McCain, basically for no apparent reason, went on this political tirade about MMA, and brought it to a crashing halt. And, if you look deeper into that, it's even more despicable because, McCain, his business outside of being in the Senate is he distributes Budweiser. He's got like a Budweiser distribution and routes, or he has some connection with Budweiser. And I really believe that Budweiser looked at MMA as a threat to boxing, and boxing was something that they had thrown a lot of money into over the years, as a sponsor. And
right.
I think originally they went the route of trying to shut it down, and they used McCain as the way to do that, and they got it taken off pay-per-view, and in essence the sport died on the vine, in the end of the late 90s, and
right.
You're looking at these guys who fought in that dark era, like Frank Shamrock and Tito in the beginning. Frank Shamrock's making like $3,000 for a title defense in the UFC with no sponsorships, and so the idea of I was making a pretty good living in New York City at that point. I'd moved back to New York, and the idea of taking MMA seriously as a way to make a living basically died. So my goal kind of changed at that point. I thought about maybe one day opening up a school and teaching jiu-jitsu. And when I got my black belt in 2004, I decided to try that. So I left my job. I left New York City. I moved down to Tampa and opened up the school here. And the timing turned out to be really good because in 2005 is when, Dana White and those guys really brought UFC back in a big way, and with it MMA, and it started becoming this juggernaut. And at that point, I was already in my mid-30s, so MMA at that point to me was more of a way of maybe legitimizing the school, getting the name out there a little bit in Tampa, And also I realized that if I was going to be teaching jiu-jitsu and MMA, I better have had some fights under my belt, and I've gone through the process and fought before, if I'm going to be somebody who's going to be teaching it and coaching people in the sport. So I felt like it was kind of a requirement. I had to do some MMA fights to legitimize the school as an MMA school. And that's pretty much what I did.
Okay. Briefly, what was that like for you, the whole MMA experience?
It was a blast. It was a blast. It was kind of surreal. Like, all these years of training jiu-jitsu and, seeing cage fights and, being part of it on the jiu-jitsu end, and then finally one day stepping into the cage. It was pretty surreal. And it was a great experience. And you get a really great respect for how hard you have to train to get ready for an MMA fight. It is such a different level of training than boxing was, and even jiu-jitsu. I mean, jiu-jitsu is so technical, and it's so strategic and so cerebral that the conditioning level is nowhere near what you need for MMA. And the training that goes into MMA, to these guys fighting MMA, especially at the elite levels, is just amazing. I mean, these guys are the most, by far the most conditioned athletes in the world, in my opinion. Just amazing. I had a newfound respect for the training that goes into being an MMA fighter, because besides having try and master all the different aspects of MMA with the striking, the grappling, the jiu-jitsu, the wrestling. Just the conditioning and I hate conditioning. I'll be honest. I despise conditioning at that level. And, it was just torture to get ready, to get yourself into a position where, you could fight 3 5-minute rounds.
Most people have no idea just how grueling and agonizing that is to get into the shape that you need to do that. Now, your current school, Gracie Tampa, is a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and an MMA gym, and you've certainly been responsible and training a lot of MMA fighters. I think you have like 9 or more fighters at your gym. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we've had 10. We've actually put 10 guys into the UFC at this point.
Oh, awesome!
So that's a stat I'm pretty proud of. We've also made it. We've also had 5 guys make it to Abu Dhabi from here. So. Nice. That's something I'm really proud of as well. In fact, making it to Abu Dhabi, I think, is in a lot of ways harder than making it to the UFC. Getting into the UFC is equal parts skill and who you know. Getting into Abu Dhabi, you have to win the trials. If you don't win the trials, you don't get into Abu Dhabi. It's pretty much that simple. Yeah. So, like I said, we've at last count put 5 guys with Abu Dhabi. So.
That's great.
I'm pretty proud of that.
Do you want to name those guys real quick, just to give them a little shout out?
Yeah, we had Master Royce, Justin Garcia was my first, Robbie D'Onofrio, Jeremy, I always forget his last name, and Josh Hayden. Were the 5 guys that represented us in Abu Dhabi.
Well, that's certainly an incredible accomplishment. So you're obviously giving world-class instructions, both in MMA as well as jiu-jitsu, and you kind of specialize more now in the no-gi. Is that correct? Yes.
I definitely made more of a departure off the traditional gi, because for a couple of reasons. One, when I got my black belt, I had done mostly gi, like 90% gi training till I got my black belt. Or at least brown belt. When I got to brown, I started doing more and more no-gi. But when I opened up the school down here, we were like 50-50. We were doing both gi and no-gi. And I just started gravitating more towards the no-gi. I liked it more. I liked the speed of it better. Honestly, I liked the realism of it better. And also, we're in Florida. So, the idea that somebody's going to be in a jacket or a sweater or a hoodie that you could use for some of the gi chokes in a self-defense situation are less and less likely.
Right.
If I was in New York still, I could see more of a legitimate self-defense reason to do more gi classes. But down in Florida, where everybody's in tank tops and T-shirts, it's a little bit harder to, make that assumption that there's some self-defense value to it. And
Sure.
and I'm a believer that, listen, we're all competitive people. Anybody who does jiu-jitsu has a competitive streak in them. And based on that, you'll take whatever competitive advantage you can take during training. And in the gi, that means certain grips, grabbing the sleeves in certain ways, controlling the collar in certain ways, controlling the lapels in certain ways. All those grips disappear when you go no-gi. And there's always going to be a learning curve. Somebody who trains, mostly gi, going into no-gi, there's going to be some type of learning curve because all the grips that they've relied on go away. So it just, I really felt like, again, I like the no-gi aspects better anyway. My students seem to like the no-gi aspects better anyway. And again, it was just harder and harder for me to find reasons why we should still be wearing the gi in terms of training. And and look, that's my opinion. I know a lot of other people share it, but some people, swear by the gi, and that's fine for them.
Yeah.
But I'm just not a big fan. And it's funny, every once in a while, some of the students will convince me to put the gi back on and train, and I'll put it on for like a day or two and be like, forget all the reasons why I hated the gi to begin with. And let me say this just to be fair. If you get two guys training in the gi who are actively working for submissions and actively training and changing positions and transitioning and stuff, the gi could be absolutely beautiful, really cool. The problem is that doesn't happen the majority of times. Once one of the guys in the sparring match realizes that the other guy maybe is a little bit faster in the transitions, that's when the stalling starts and the holding.
Yeah.
And that drives me crazy. And so, it was just like the slow, steady march from, like a 50-50 school all the way to pretty much 100% no-gi. Now, some of our affiliates, some of my other locations, like Matt Arroyo, he still likes the gi, so he teaches the gi down there. He's got plenty of gi classes down there. So the Gracie Tampa students still have the ability to go do gi, just not much at my location.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk a little bit about your involvement with the Wounded Warrior Project and your grappling system for amputees, the Veterans Adaptive MMA. Tell us about that work you're involved in.
Oh, yeah, cool. That's been like a baby of mine for a few years. I was the head combative instructor at SOCOM for about 8 years. And, training with those guys down at SOCOM, because SOCOM's located right here in Tampa. And that was an amazing, amazing experience. I got to work with, the elite guys in the military. So anybody who was stationed at SOCOM in special operations, I got a chance to work with. And so you're talking Green Berets, Navy SEALs, 75th Ranger Regiment. I even got a chance to work with Delta and
nice.
Some of the Tier 1 guys over the years. And it was just amazing. And I didn't really have a lot of knowledge of the military before that. And those guys impressed the hell out of me. They're fighting an impossible. They're put in impossible situations, given the ridiculous, some of the ridiculous parameters our politicians put on them to fight. They're basically fighting, handcuffed with one hand behind their back in their situation, and it's terrible. And people, they look at the number of people killed in Iraq and the number of people killed in Afghanistan. The number that goes unnoticed because of all these advances in medicine, and especially like triage medicine, and our military's ability to get to the soldier right away. We've saved so many people, but a lot of these people become, amputees. Whereas, 20, 30, 40 years ago, they wouldn't have made it. So people look at Iraq and say, well, 5,000 people died compared to 50,000 in Vietnam. But
right.
they don't notice that there's 50,000 people coming out of Iraq. And I don't know if that's the right number, but coming out of Iraq missing a limb, who are now saved due to advances in the military with the medicine. And so we have this whole generation of soldiers who now have to deal with some type of amputation. And one of those guys started training with me. You got this guy named Rick Cicero. The guy is just a total stud, and he was blown up he was blown up in Afghanistan, and he's a above the knee amputee on the right side, and above the elbow amputee on the right side also. So he's basically missing the majority of his right leg and right arm. And he came in to train. I met him through somebody, and he was telling me, he was very candid, and he was like, I always felt like I was a hard charger. I was always like the guy going into the firefight. I was going into the situation. And he goes, now, honestly, after this injury, I feel like I'm the victim. And he goes, all you need to do is push me over, and I can't stand back up on my own. I remember he actually just gave his speech at Walter Reed when we were up there, and it was really, really touching. And I said to him, what do you mean you can't stand up? He goes, well, I can't stand up. If you push me down, I have to crawl over to something to use to help get me back to my feet. And just using some jiu-jitsu principles of standing up in base, we were able to get him standing up that day. He was standing up on his own that day. Now awesome. He's in a position to, he could stand up as quick as anybody.
Wow.
And so we started working, I started working with him directly, and we just kind of said, look, let's not focus on what you can't do. Let's focus on what you can do, and then we'll kind of use strategy to get these people into your stronger areas. Like, obviously, he's not going to have much of a guard because he's missing, the majority of one of his legs. So we don't spend a lot of time working on guard. We have a couple little tricks for him in the guard, but his side mount defense is phenomenal. And we've created a bunch of reversals he can do. Some of it using the fact that he's missing an arm and a leg. He can get away with things that most people can't. And
wow.
In some ways, we've turned some of his injuries into a strength. And he's awesome. He's able to reverse you from side mount, and when he gets on top of you, he's a bear. He's got like a series of submissions that are very high percentage, and he can catch a lot of people on them. And he got to the point where he's rolling around on the ground after about a year with one arm and one leg, and he is submitting blue belts. Not every blue belt, but he was submitting blue belts. So
nice.
I promoted him to blue belt, and Rick was really the impetus for this. He came to me and said, this is something I really think a lot of people in the military can use, because, some of these guys, they come out with these injuries, and it's kind of taken away their warrior ethos,
Right.
It's taken away a huge chunk of their identity. And jiu-jitsu is something that can give it back to them. So through trial and error, like first, I'd worked with SOCOM for 8 years. Through my work with SOCOM, they had sent me up to Fort Benning, and I'd worked with the instructors at Big Army, at the combatives headquarters for the armies at Fort Benning. So I started working with those guys up there back in 2011, and a lot of them affiliated under me as their jiu-jitsu coach. So they would take trips down to Tampa for extended stays here. They'd bring me up to Fort Benning, and I'd work with them up there. And I got a chance to work with the combatives guys a lot, and we became pretty tight. And when me and Rick started working on this adaptive program, they were able to set up like a week-long sessions where I would go up and work with guys with amputations. And it's really challenging. It's really fun because you have to adapt the situation for each and every single different type of amputation. So not everybody has the same injuries. You have somebody who's missing maybe his right leg, but it's below the knee.
Right.
So he has a little bit more to work with than the guy who's above the knee. One guy's on the right side, one guy's on the left side. So there's this amazing challenge to, again, not worry about what they can't do, but figure out a strategy for these guys to defend themselves and work to positions that they can do. And it's super challenging. It's super fun. for me to give back to these guys. And after a few years of doing this, the combatives guys at Fort Benning basically said, we like the program a lot, but you're kind of the subject matter expert on it. Why don't you run with it? And as most things with, big organizations like the Army and the Armed Forces, it took a little while for some momentum to get built. But now Walter Reed seems to be on board, and Walter Reed is kind of like the last word on the injury, on adaptive programs, because there are, I think it's a 3-star command. It's a combined command, so it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, it's everybody. And I just did a trip up to Walter Reed and did like a pilot course with them, and they really liked it. We had a room full of guys again with all these different injuries, and some of them aren't necessarily amputees. Some of them just might be, TBIs, traumatic brain injuries. Some of them could be almost anything. And I work in the room, and I basically will teach a certain technique or certain strategy, and then I'll go around the room and try and adapt it to each person's injury as best I can, so that it could work with them with their injury. And we've had a great success. Cool. Yeah, we've had a really good success rate. Walter Reed seems to really like the program a lot. I'm going back up in January to do another one, and we'll see where it goes. But we've got nothing but great feedback. And some of the soldiers who I've worked with have sent me some of the nicest and coolest messages, on Facebook and on email, where they just have, they've found a new love, a new hobby, a new passion to keep them focused. And really, that's the goal,
Dude, that's so incredible. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, that I have high respect for you, but this area in particular just drives it up that much higher, because people that serve in the armed forces, and even especially our elite forces, they're keeping it real on awesome high level. And like you said, that they have the warrior ethos, and whenever they get injured, you can only imagine what kind of toll that takes in their life. And you are really restoring. Yeah, it
really does strip away. It could potentially strip away their identity, and when that happens, they kind of lose hope. And I just don't think our country is doing enough for these people to restore that. And if I could do a little bit to help these guys, it's great. It's definitely the most rewarding aspect of what I do is seeing. I had a guy in here last week I was working with who was blown up in an IED explosion, and he has, I can't even list the damage that this guy has. Now he has no amputations, but the amount of brain damage that this guy has suffered has severely affected his motor skills. And by the end of our session, he was doing a Kimura, he was doing an armbar, he was doing a guillotine choke. And nice. He had a smile on his face from ear to ear. His motor skills are so impacted that he can't really speak very well. But now all he does is look forward to our jiu-jitsu sessions. So, there's no price on that when you get to see. No, and his really mother, he has to have 24-hour care, so he has a caregiver, and his mother come with him to the sessions. And the mom is such a sweet lady. They're financially crushed over this. They're not getting the help they need. But this now seems to be the one thing that's keeping this guy, motivated, excited, happy, in all these other facets. Now he's going through his physical therapy much harder because he wants to get better for jiu-jitsu. And, you can't put a price tag on stuff like that.
I completely agree. Hats off to you for making such a deep impact in their lives, man.
Honestly, it's not, Rick Cicero, the original guy I told you about, he is really the driving force behind this. I'm helping with the technical knowledge and helping, tweak jiu-jitsu to help to make it work for these guys with their various injuries. But Rick has really been the driving force behind getting this program off the ground and dealing with the bureaucracies of the armed forces and and all the different charities and you know, navigating all those minefields. That's been Rick. Without his passion, without his drive, this program wouldn't be where it is today. He's really the hero behind getting this thing going. I'm more like the technical advisor, and I'm happy with that. You know, I'm happy with my role, but you know, I'm also realistic enough to know that this is, without Rick, this wouldn't be anywhere, because he understands how to navigate those minefields, and that's exactly what they are. We've had many disappointments over the last few years trying to get this program off the ground. Many disappointments, and it's never gotten to Rick. It's never let him lose hope. He's always found a way around it, and now it seems like we're really headed. Once Walter Reed got on board, it seems like we're kind of being fast forwarded, and things are starting to happen much quicker now all of a sudden. So hopefully this time next year, this program might be, you know, nationwide.
Awesome. Well, much respect to him as well. It sounds like you guys have a perfect partnership, and you're really able to join forces and push it forward. And I appreciate that you guys have stayed with it. Like you said, it hasn't been an easy road to do that, but it's well worth it. So I salute you for going forward and staying with it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. But it really, like I said, it really is. It's one of the most, you know, satisfying things that this job lets me do.
I was going to ask you what are you the most proud of? I know you've done a lot throughout your life and accomplished a lot, and I was going to ask you, what are you most proud of? I'm sure this has got to be way up there on the list.
Oh, definitely. This is up there. And honestly, just I mean, this definitely has its own spot on the list for sure. But you know, the relationships I've developed with my students, you know, especially the long-term students like Master Royce, Brock Hooten, Justin Garcia, Mike Wacker, like some of these relationships span 20 years, and you know, I've got to watch them go from white belt to black belt under me. You know, I've watched some of these guys make their own mark in the like Master Royce making their own mark in the jiu-jitsu world, and that to me is another, you know, overwhelmingly proud thing to see. You know, Master Royce and Justin and these guys going to Abu Dhabi and, you know, being considered on their own some of the best grapplers in the country. That is, you know, that never gets old for me.
I'm sure it's got to feel good to know that you've played a major part in their lives and their success and their development. So almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you if there's something that comes to mind that you could share that most people aren't aware of, or most people would be surprised to know about you.
Most people would be surprised to know about me. I don't know. Well, I love, I don't think this would be surprising, but I'm an avid gun guy. I love going shooting. The working with the guys at SOCOM, they got me into shooting. So I'm a big shooter. I shoot pretty much every week. And I guess the thing that would surprise most people about me, I get this all the time, was I was an avid reader of the Twilight books. And that I like the Twilight series of both the movies and the books. And I am an absolute ravenous Game of Thrones fan.
Nice.
I've read the books, like each book I probably read at least 3 times, and you know, obviously watched the series from start to finish over and over again. Outside of that, I'm pretty much jiu-jitsu is my life. I come in, I train, I teach, and then I watch Game of Thrones and I go to bed. You know, I'm now at the point where my children are of the age where they can start training. So I'm really looking forward to spreading the knowledge to my children. And seeing them grow in jiu-jitsu. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And that's going to be starting in the next couple months. So
that's great.
That'll be a blast. Oh, and I guess the other thing, I'm a big advocate for pit bull rescues. And
nice, very nice.
I've rescued a few. Actually, one sitting next to me right now as we do this interview. And in rescuing him, I started fostering dogs. And to date, now we have. Basically, what happens is I have 2 pits. Leo is my main one. He comes with me both to and from the school. He's with me wherever I go. We have another one at the house. She's a little dog aggressive, so we use the school as a place to foster dogs. And I usually keep one dog here until we can find it a home. And this just recently we fostered our 10th dog and found it a home.
Wow.
So in the last 3 years, we've fostered 10 dogs and found them homes. So that's
really great, man.
That's
really cool.
That's something that's really near and dear to me is pit bulls and pit bull rescues and giving them a fighting chance, because they are the most misunderstood dogs in the world.
Yeah, I was about to say they get a really bad rap, and it's totally unwarranted, really.
Totally unwarranted. Totally. They're the sweetest, most naturally sweet dogs you'll ever meet, yet, they're put in some of the most horrific conditions.
Yes.
And people wonder why. If you took a lab or a golden retriever and you put it in the same conditions that most pit bulls grow up in, you get some dogs that bite. You get plenty of golden retrievers that bite too.
Absolutely.
A pit bull raised in a good home with love will almost never ever be person aggressive, ever.
I found that to be true for sure. I have a part pit and part lab, and just the most amazing dog ever. But I've definitely completely agree that raised in better conditions are some of the most loving and great dogs in the world.
The Leo, the one I was just telling you about, I rescued him when he was about 2 or 3. He was used he was abused. He was used in organized dog fights. He's got scars all over his body. Yet he is the sweetest dog you'll ever meet. Even going through the first 2 years of his life like that, he loves animals. He loves dogs. He loves people. He's the most non-aggressive dog you'll ever meet. Yet he's got no reason to be, considering the first 2.5 years of his life he was living on a chain out in the backyard all by himself. The only time he came off the chain was to fight. And he's cuddled up on the couch next to me, snoring away.
Nice. Well, you've made a lot of impact in not only a lot of people's lives, but certainly in dogs as well, it sounds like. For a last thing, Rob, if you could, we didn't spend quite as much time as I would like exploring your relationship with Royce. So I know it's been a long and a great relationship. So just to bring this to a close, if you could speak a little bit to what it's like being in Royce's first black belt and just what that's been like over the years for you.
Well, yeah. First off, I was I got my black belt with 4 other people. We became Royce's first black belts. One of the cool things about that was I got my black belt with John Burke, who was the guy who originally got me involved with jiu-jitsu. So that was one of the great moments, was the fact that me and John, basically he started me on the journey, and we've maintained our friendship all these years now, 20-something years. And we were able to get our black belts together. As for Royce, man, let me tell you, the first year or so I met Royce, I really didn't think he liked me. I just got this weird vibe from him. I didn't think he liked me. He never laughed at my jokes. And, back then it was like I said, he was the undefeated UFC champ, number 1. Number 2, it was clear very early on that this was something I wanted to do in some capacity for the rest of my life. So obviously it was important for me for Royce to like me. And I really didn't get the feeling that he did in the first year or so. And finally one day, I'll make a long story short, we got into a bit of an argument at the Gracie Academy. And I snapped at him pretty badly, and I said some things I probably shouldn't have. And my temper went before my brain kicked in to think about what I was saying. And I was like, oh my God, did I just yell at Royce like that? Oh my God, I'm going to die. It was funny because then the next day I saw him in the hallway at the Gracie Academy, and he started joking around with me. And I think I kind of realized that, especially at that stage, where Royce, this was literally, when Royce was at the peak of, he was the undefeated UFC champ. He had not lost yet. People were treating him like a god. And here's this, punk kid from New York talking trash back to him. And turned out he liked it. I think he enjoyed that, he doesn't want to be put on the pedestal. He likes to be one of the guys. He likes to joke around. He likes to, he likes to be a regular guy. And from that moment on, we became legitimately good friends. And through all these years, here's a guy who's, super famous, and you know, you see it at different levels all the time. People get into this place where they think they deserve certain things because of their, you know, their notoriety, their fame, or whatever. And Royce is the exact opposite of that. He has, you know, done things for me and been in my corner through the years for so many different things. It's unbelievable. I could tell you story after story of things where Royce had, you know, helped me out or got my back or did something for me, you know, at the drop of a dime because I asked him to. He's just been a really good, loyal friend for the last 20 years. And, you know, I'm proud of the fact that, you know, I've gotten every belt from him. You know, he'll be the only guy to ever give me a promotion because, you know, his loyalty, his friendship has been amazing. Like, he really is just a good person. Let me tell you something, though. Yeah. He is an enormous, he loves the bust chops more than anybody I know, though. And if you get into a practical joke war with him, get ready to dig in and go all the way to the end, because Royce will go to extreme. He's one of the most competitive people I've ever met in my life, and he will go to such extremes to win that it's not even funny. So don't go there unless you're ready to take it to the absolute end, because he will go that far.
That's funny.
I've learned that at my detriment, unfortunately.
I'm sure you could feel a lot of time just telling those stories. But what an incredible opportunity, you know, for you to connect with him way back at such an early time in your life, and to have that, maintain that relationship over the years. Very special. And
also, it's definitely been an amazing ride with Royce, and John Burke for that matter. Absolutely amazing ride with those guys.
Right on. Rob, if anybody wants to get up with you, could you share your website and information with them, please?
Yeah, sure. The website is www.gracietampa.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook. It's Rob Kahn, or official Gracie Tampa on Facebook. And if you guys are over in the Tampa area and you want to swing by and train, just hit me up and come on by.
Well, man, you've certainly had an interesting life, and I very much appreciate you taking time to let us have a glimpse into it and get to know you better. I really appreciate it, and much respect to you, sir.
Thank you. I really appreciate the time, and if you ever need me for anything, please give me a call.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, really enjoyed that interview with Rob. Stay tuned now for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Okay, time for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Today's subject, life is a test. It is only a test. If you're like me, you can be guilty of, on occasion, taking life too seriously. But a good way to reframe this is to think of life as a series of tests. When you look at life and its many challenges as a test, or a series of tests, you begin to see each issue you face as an opportunity to grow, a chance to roll with the punches. Whether you're being bombarded with problems, responsibilities, even insurmountable hurdles, when looked at as a test, you always have a chance to succeed, in the sense of rising above that which is challenging you. If, on the other hand, you see each new issue you face as a serious battle that must be won in order to survive, you're probably in for a very rocky journey. The only time you're likely to be happy is when everything is working out just right. And we all know how often that happens. So as an experiment, see if you can apply this idea to something you're forced to deal with. Perhaps it's a difficult person in your life, or a demanding boss, or whatever it may be. See if you can redefine the issue you face from being a, quote, problem to being a test. Rather than struggling with your issue, see if there's something you can learn from it. Ask yourself, why is this issue in my life? What would it mean, and what would be involved to rise above it? Can I see it as a test of some kind? When you use this strategy, you may be surprised at your changed responses. So as you go through your day, your week, your month, try keeping this in mind and try reframing and thinking of your challenges as a series of tests. I think by doing this, you'll find yourself able to deal with your challenges much easier and quite possibly experience more joy in your life. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. I appreciate all feedback, so if you have feedback, please don't hesitate to give it. If you have ideas for the show or for guests, please let me know about those. You can leave feedback on the website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com. You can also leave feedback on iTunes, and while you're there, make sure to rate the show. It helps us with our standing in iTunes. If you haven't liked us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, please go ahead and do that. And don't forget to share the episodes on your Facebook and social media. Again, thanks again for listening, and until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.